Okay, hello everybody. We are here to discuss effective strategies for ZAT. ZAT, as you all know, is the entrance exam through which you get into premier institutions like XLRI, XIMB, etc. And it is in many ways very different from CAT. So to discuss what kind of strategies one should have for an exam like ZAT, we have two ex-students of XLRI Jamshedpur. We have Harjeev Singh Ahluwalia. He is an XLRI pass out. Currently, he is the director of digital consulting with Value Labs. And we have Siddhant Shekhar, again an alumni of XLRI, currently working as assistant manager HR with ITC Limited. And I am Sanjeev, founder of Eklavya Learning Resources. Harjeev and Siddhant, welcome to the show. Welcome to this discussion. Glad to have you here. I'll just briefly introduce the format of ZAT, and then I'll ask you to share your views about what kind of strategies, what different preparation is required for an exam like ZAT. Okay.
Sure.
So we'll just look at certain key features of ZAT. It's a 3-hour exam. It's going to be a 3-hour exam this year. There are 4 sections. 4 sections are divided into 2 parts. Part 1 has verbal ability, verbal and logical ability, decision making, and quantitative ability and data interpretation. Section wise, verbal and logical ability has got 26 questions, decision making has got 21 questions, and quantitative ability and DI has got 28 questions. Overall 75 questions to be answered in 165 minutes. There are another 25 questions which are general knowledge questions which are to be answered in 15 minutes. So overall 100 questions. Overall time available is 180 minutes or 3 hours. Certain other key features that every student needs to know is there's 1 mark for each correct answer in ZAT, 0.25 negative mark for each wrong answer. There is no negative mark for general knowledge questions, and the general knowledge questions are not taken into account while calculating the overall percentile. This year they have said that they will introduce a new numerical answer type question, which is like theta as we have it in CAT, where you have to type in, the candidates have to type in the answers. So they will have certain questions which will be of numerical answer type. One different and unique feature that ZAT has is that for every unattempted question beyond 8 questions, there's a negative marking of 0.1 mark. So this is how it is slightly different from CAT. Now, my question open to both of you. We can start with Harjeev, and then Siddhant, you can take the same question, and then we will have the second question, and in the same order. I would want your views on each of the questions that I'll keep bringing to you one by one. So now that CAT is over, all those who prepare or who want to get into any top MBA college typically take all these exams, starting with CAT, then they take all the exams that come after that. So NMAT or ZAT and SNAP, most of the candidates do take all these tests. Once CAT is over, what are the things that the students should focus on if we are talking specifically of ZAT? What kind of preparation? How do they prepare? What all do they study? Specifically for an exam like CAT, for somebody who has done his preparation for CAT and taken the CAT, now it is time for that student to sit for the ZAT.
Yeah. So I think, thank you for the question. So I think one of the first 2 things that are somewhat primary, the 2 things that are a differentiating factor that set the ZAT apart from the CAT are firstly the general knowledge section. But as everyone knows, the general knowledge section neither has negative marking nor is it considered for the ZAT score. It's something that comes in to play once you're working towards your admission process. But that being said, it's still just as important. The second factor is that within the verbal section, there is an angle of critical reasoning to it. That's why it's called verbal and logical ability. And that's something that maybe it has been taken somewhere from how the GMAT works. And essentially what then gets added to the verbal section, so it's not to say that the level of difficulty is higher, it's about the same level of difficulty as the cat, and certain, and the RCs in fact might actually be slightly easier than those in the cat. But what's different there is that apart from just having the verbal reasoning ability, you also need to take into account the perspective that is going into all of these questions. So essentially, every single question within the decision making section, as well as the verbal reasoning sections, needs to have an angle of understanding as to how you're trying to answer the question and not just what the answer is.
So most of the questions you are saying, either in decision making or even in verbal, would be such that you'll have to apply a lot of critical thinking and logic,
Yes.
not just your knowledge of vocabulary and the English language.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do you prepare for this then differently? I mean, now that in the given time that you have after CAT, how do you prepare specifically for these kind of things?
So I think from personal experience, one of the things that I would recommend doing is, especially because of the slight difference in format, there are advantages, great advantages from the perspective that you get to, uh, there isn't a sectional time limit. So that gives you a lot of control over the process, and you can flow freely as in how you want to. So that's essentially how you should be practicing tests, where you pick up a lot of old XAT exams, whether they were offline or online, and go through them and practice them. And then once you have the answers to the questions, you need to apply an element of reasoning to understand why a certain question had the correct answer as what it was.
Okay. So you're saying typically last 10 years questions or actual papers, if somebody is preparing it with and trying to understand
Yeah.
the logic behind it, that would suffice, or that will be good enough?
Yes. According to me, that should be in itself good enough, because the preparation you've done for the CAT is good enough contextually. This is just an element that is sort of a layer on top, and which should be scalable just with having an extensive preparation based on the previous exams.
Okay. Siddhant, your take on this?
So I think I agree with most of what Harjeev has said. Couple of things that I would like to add to that is, firstly, the decision making section. That is something unique to the exam, at least as far as the Indian B school entrances are concerned. I think that, so far to my knowledge, that is the only exam which does something of this sort. And this is actually, um, I've seen a lot of candidates have a make or break with just this section, because I remember when I took the test, my score shot up because of my scores in the decision making section. Whereas I had a friend, and like in fact a few friends, who had very good scores in verbal and in quantitative, but because their scores weren't there, they were in like some 60-70% and in DM they couldn't convert. So I think DM decision making, if you can nail it down, that can just give a very big boost to your score. If you were like hovering at maybe a 95 or a 96, if you can nail the DM section, it can take you up maybe to a 98 or 99, which is often a case. That's the make or break case between a selection or a rejection at an exam at that level. And decision making, in and of itself is not very difficult, but because there is a certain level of ambiguity there, people are not very comfortable with it. People always second guess themselves, and they leave out questions that they should have actually attempted. So in decision making section, I would recommend going through old test papers and try to understand what is it, what is the rationale behind choosing an answer. So often, over there again, elimination works very well. In among the 4 or the 5 options, you can very quickly eliminate 2 or 3. Your the crux of your answer will depend upon 1 or 2 options, where you'll have to decide which is the best course of action. And over there, if you can keep in mind that what you're doing is ethical, what you're doing is it brings the best for all the stakeholders involved. As long as you keep these 2 thumb rules in your mind, I think you should be able to ace this section very well. And that can always make that 1% difference that is often there between the selection and the rejection.
Okay. So you're saying decision making is probably the differentiator, and if somebody can really focus on that, it can really tilt the scales in his or her favor.
Yeah.
And the best way to prepare for that, you are saying, is again go through the previous year's questions and all, and understand the logic behind it.
Yes.
Also, Harjeev and Siddhant, decision making, just like probably RC, does it also require you not to apply your own brain in a way that in the context of the question and the information given with all the stakeholders or whatever is the situation given, whatever information is there in the question, you have to only use that and then arrive at the best option rather than think yourself what ideally you think would be right or wrong. Am I able to make myself clear? What
Yeah.
I'm saying is you have to only take into account the factors or variables given in the question rather than think yourself from your own ideas that this ideally should be the case or this is what should be done in this case.
Yeah. I think literally what you need to do in that question is think of the answers from the perspective of who the stakeholder is in that question. So you need to put yourself in the boots of that person, and then accordingly play out that role and figure out what the best answer would have been for you as that person and not you as whoever you are.
Correct. That is what I'm saying. You have to
Yeah.
cut out your biases, your as an
Yeah.
individual that you are. Siddhant?
Yeah, I think I agree with Harjeet. One more thing over there, the one key differentiator that it has as compared to the RCs is that in RCs, you are quote unquote not supposed to apply your mind. For example, if you have a piece of information from a newspaper article you read or something, you cannot bring that into that question. And I think to a large extent, DM also follows the same. However, at the same time, it does expect you to use your own brain in terms of making that decision. So, for example, it could ask you questions like that. You are the mayor of a city and there's crime on the rise and you have this much money and how will you allocate it to fight crime? So in that case, you have to bring in your common sense to think that, maybe investing in healthcare, if crime is your priority, is not the best action to go about it. So in that case, you have to bring in your common sense, and that is something which is different from RC, where you don't have to do that because all the facts are there to you in front of in that passage in front of you, and you have to stick to that. However, over here you have to use your common sense. And I'm not saying that you bring in facts or your biases into the question. For example, if you think that stricter punishment should be meted out, you do that. Over there, you are constrained by the foundations given to you by the question.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you also have to consider that there are some very commonsensical things. For example, if crime is a problem, you shouldn't invest on healthcare.
Agreed.
Or if healthcare is a problem, you shouldn't be investing on civil engineering. So these kind of common sense things you have to keep in mind. You cannot depend upon the question to give you these facts as well.
Completely agree. But I was just talking about keeping out your biases because at times it becomes difficult because you have a certain predisposition towards certain issues.
Right.
And you tend to kind of mix the facts as well as your own biases, and then you have to just filter it out.
Right. So which is why I mentioned that thing about the thumb rules. If your course of decision is the most ethical one and it brings about the maximum benefit for the maximum number of stakeholders, it usually is the correct answer.
I noticed that you emphasized on the word ethical earlier also.
Yeah, because one of the things, so bit of an insider information, the decision-making section, one of the key people involved in setting up that question paper is the professor of ethics in XLRI.
Okay.
Yeah.
And even in general, the motto of XLRI itself is for the greater good. So because of things like that, at least in the Excel ethos, ethics are a very important part. Whereas, it's sort of, drilled down to you, not just in your coursework, but also in like the culture of the place, that if you have to make a choice between what's ethical and what's easy, you go with what's ethical.
Okay.
So which is why, I am always bringing that focus back on ethical, because sometimes there will be choices given to you where you do things like, where they promote insider trading or they ask you to bribe an official. If you go with those options, I can guarantee in maybe 95% of the cases, that would be the incorrect option.
Or even something as simple as ignoring a wrong that was done by someone else. That anything of that sort.
That will be also considered as a wrong fact.
Yeah.
Very insightful information, Harjeev and Siddhant. Very insightful. In fact, at times people think that at times you have to prove yourself as a go-getter. So even if you have to probably use some kind of unfair means, you'll have to, you'll try and get a job done because you are supposed to be seen as a go-getter who will get the results delivered somehow.
Right.
So very, very important discerning factor. Okay. Harjeev, you spoke about, in fact, that was my next question, that since unlike CAT, there is no sectional time limit here. that makes it even more challenging for the candidate to manage his or her own time in the best possible manner. And we have had certain discussions on this earlier. Siddhant has been a part of our discussions earlier, where we say that it is like to each his own. What works best for me is what I should try and implement. For you, what specifically has been the strategy in terms of time allocation for each section, and what would you recommend to two kind of students we can at most take? One, somebody who is very strong in quant, say somebody having an engineering background, and somebody who is a general humanities or commerce student who is good in English, reasonable in maths, not very strong and all. So two kind of students. What kind of strategy would you suggest?
Okay.
Starting with Harjeev, then Siddhant.
So I think one of the first things to keep in mind is the fact that because everyone has spent a lot of time practicing for the CAT already, they've gotten used to a certain pattern where the order of sections is in a particular way, right? So if you're someone who's highly dependent on practice, much more so than anything else and much more than contextual knowledge, then I would recommend just sticking to the same section order at least that you followed within the CAT. And the second point there would be with time limits. Even when you've attempted the CAT or any mock tests otherwise, you would have personally realized that this section feels like you had a bit more time than you needed, and a particular section felt like you had lesser time. So that's where you make adjustments while you're doing your mock tests for the ZAT to figure out what your ideal time limit is. And then on the day of the actual exam, you give yourself just that amount of time, and you can always go back to that section, which is the added advantage that I was talking about. That you don't have to leave a question. And you shouldn't leave a question, because beyond a point, as you said, there are negative marks for that as well. Now, if I go by the type of student, if you're someone who's, I'll take the second kind of student first. So if you're someone who's not as comfortable with the quantitative section, I think the best thing there to do is to, again, this is a personal opinion there, but I think the best thing to do there would be to pick up on the verbal section first, get done with that section, go into the quantitative section, but keep a slightly lesser amount of time than you would have usually. And the reason I say this is, if the section does not go extremely well for whatever reason, you might get demotivated and your state of mind might not be in a place where you'd be able to do justice to the decision-making section. But as Siddhant said, the decision-making section truly is the make or break section. And unlike Siddhant, the decision-making section was the one where I actually would have, if I had done even average in that section, I would have had, I think, 99.5 or something. But I didn't, because I just barely cleared the cutoff. So that section is the deciding factor, because not many people do well on it. So you need to have your state of mind right by the time you're stepping into that section. And if you're a student who's much stronger in quant than anything else, I think that makes the order slightly easier for you, because you just pick quant, you get it done. Then it doesn't matter which of the two sections you pick. I think unless you're someone who's very uncomfortable with verbal, then I'd say maybe just pick the decision-making section and give, like, just for a mental break, just pick a small part of it first and then come back to it later as well, because you need to have enough energy as well to take the verbal section if it's not your strongest.
In terms of time allocation, what would you suggest? I mean, suppose I am a student who is very strong in quant.
Yeah.
Should I probably spend a little more time on a pro rata basis for quant so that I ensure that I get the maximum number of right answers there? Because I know it's my strong area. So in terms of the time allocation, what would be your advice, or what did you try yourself? Because both of you got very good percentile in that.
So for me, personally, one of the areas that had always been the strongest was the verbal section. And so what I did there and in fact, a problem that I used to face in the CAT was that the verbal section was the first section, and it would finish for me much before time, which meant that I always had 15 to 20 minutes where I wasn't sure of what to do. So that gave me, I already had it in mind that I will have a 15-minute window that gets added automatically to whichever section I want to add it to, which was the quant section. So if you're someone who's confident with verbal, you always have this added advantage where you can take time from the verbal section away and put it into the quantitative section. And for decision making, just purely, if you've practiced enough, I think it's a section that will not take a lot of time. So you can easily, what you can do is maybe give, say, about 70 to 75 minutes to the quantitative section in whatever order you're attempting it. Like, you can allocate that time for it.
Okay.
And get to the decision making section, but ensure that you have at least 45 minutes for that section, even if you're very used to it. And if you think that it's going to get done sooner and you have questions left from another section, you can always go back.
Okay. Siddhant, what have
I
you
think,
used and what would you recommend?
yeah, so going in, I knew that verbal was my strongest section because even in the CAT, I had a similar experience where I would get done with my verbal section about 30-35 minutes, and then I think that was the year they introduced the single 1 hour time windows for each of the sections. So I sat around waiting for about 20-25 minutes in verbal, which was time I could have definitely used up better in, if I was allowed to take it over to my logical reasoning or my quant. So cat in sorry, in that in those terms is definitely more flexible. It allows you to take that time and put it allows you to allocate your time in a way that you see best. So what I used was I went in verbal, took me about some 25-30 minutes maybe. I got done with that, and then I moved over directly to the next section of decision making. Because again, so the reason I recommend, and this is coming from my personal experience, is that I always recommend that you start with your strongest section, because there are two major benefits for this. First is, of course, it's your strongest section. You're going in with a fresh mind. You are not bogged down by your performance in the previous section. So obviously your performance gets better because you have less things to worry. Secondly, it gives you that confidence that what things
Right.
are going well.
The
This paper
psychological
is
advantage of
I am in a exactly. So because I started with verbal, and I think I had left maybe one question. So I went into quants feeling a lot more confident, because once I was in quants, there were a lot of questions that I wanted to come back to later, or I wasn't sure, what the correct answer should be. But that didn't bog me down, because I already knew that I knew that I had already nailed down the verbal section. So in cases where you do get that opportunity, especially in an exam like that where you have that option, I recommend you start with your strongest option. You start if you're good with quants, you start with quants. If you're good with verbal, you start with verbal. You get through with that section, and then you go to the other section where you think you are weaker. And the the sort of added advantage to this is that if there is any question in the previous section that you left out, you can always come back to it, because it wouldn't take you that much time to solve that question, because you're already good with that section. So I would recommend, goes back to the thing that sort of been the theme for all of our discussions. Figure out what works best for you. If you're good with verbal, go with verbal. If you're good with quants, go with quants first. But make sure that whatever you're going with, don't get obsessed with a question. For example, there are questions from maybe topics like number system, or maybe some topics in algebra, where you have to manually count the number of numbers that follow a certain pattern, or number of numbers that follow a certain criteria. So those questions do take up a lot of time. Don't get obsessed over that question. That question is just there to make you waste time. So leave that question out, move on, come back to it. If in the end you still have like 15 minutes to go and you don't have anything else to do, come back to that question. But don't forget that even the easy questions are worth the same number of marks. So don't make that mistake of getting bogged down by a question. And that generally happens in the sections you're good at. Because then, it sort of becomes like that thing that, I'm good with this section. How can I not solve this question? It's okay. There are questions that are not, that there are questions that are there not meant to be solved. So recognize that, move on, answer all the questions that you can. If there's something left, come back to it later. But always, I would recommend always start with your strength, because it gives you that confidence boost going into the weaker section, and that way you are much less stressed if the section is not going the way you expected it to.
very, very valid point. In fact, you spoke about intelligent selection of questions. It actually came out as a very, very important factor in CAT this year. It has been now termed as one of the toughest cats that people have come across, probably in last many,
Okay.
many years. Last few years it has
Mhm.
been tougher than it used to be earlier. Earlier it was
Mhm.
more about time pressure, more than 125 or at times 175 questions in 2 hours. Now it was like standardized for the last couple of years. It was like 3 hours 100 questions. But this year the time limit was reduced to 2 hours. People were expecting that since the time has been reduced from 3 to 2 hours, the number of questions would come down proportionately. It will be like 66, 67, but the number of questions
Mhm.
was 76. Time was 2 hours. and the paper was tougher than it has been in the last 4-5 years. That is where what you are saying, intelligent selection of questions that you really need to answer or can answer becomes so very important, that you really, and this year our expectation is that people who get 50% correct answer should get 99 plus percentile easily in CAT. So it is like you don't even have to answer half the questions. You can still leave out half the questions, still come out on top. Don't worry too much about. So I just compare. I've been talking to a lot of students. I have spoken to a lot of experts who have taken the exam themselves, and they were saying, IIM इंदौर ने ये क्या कर दिया, इतना टफ कोई पेपर सेट करता है कि आप बच्चों का पूरा साल बर्बाद कर दिया है. And I was like, you have to cross the river. You don't have to fall in love with it, or you don't have to fight it. Right. If on the day that you have to cross that river, the water is very cold, don't blame the river. Just focus on doing what you can do, adapt best to the conditions, and try and reach the other side.
Right.
This year, so XLRI, again, it has got slightly probably less time pressure in terms of the total time available for doing the same questions. But the questions, as you are saying, are such that you really need to apply a lot of critical thinking and logical thinking, and then you can't really just knowledge of English language and all will not help you.
Right. And also there's one more thing that Zat does. Zat loves throwing curveballs. Every year they throw at least one curveball to the student, usually in the maybe first 5 or 10 questions, that's really meant to throw you off your game. So I remember the year I took the Zat, there was a poem in the reading comprehension section. And that was something that, no one was expecting. And it was a very difficult poem. The questions were fairly simple. But a lot of people skipped it over thinking that, it's a poem, I don't know what to do with this. But if you actually read the poem, it was a very simple poem. The questions, couple of them were, I think, vocabulary questions. One of them was meaning of that phrase, very basic stuff. But a lot of people skipped over that question because, I have not prepared for this. I was just doing reading comprehension with passages. I've never read a poem. How will I do this? And move on.
Yeah, that
so
is
always expect.
Yes, that is a unique thing about that. Even in RC, you can get poems and all.
Exactly. And it's not just limited to just RCs or just the verbal section. It can happen in quant also. It can happen in DM also. So Zat loves throwing curveballs. Expect those. Don't let that one curveball throw you off your game for the rest of the exam, because they often do this, and that's the intention, that it's to differentiate between the very well prepared student and the student who's sort of prepared. Because the very well prepared student knows that it's fine, it's the same number of marks, even if I don't get this, if I can compensate it elsewhere, it's fine. But the sort of prepared student, they're like, if I'm missing out questions in the very starting, how will I follow through for the rest of the exam? And that just ends up making you mess up your whole paper.
Yeah. So that brings me to my final question to both of you, because largely in terms of preparation, even if there are many students who are at the same level, but then does it at some level become a mental game where how well you can really handle that entire pressure of that exam during those 2 or 3 hours, whatever time is there? For example, I'm saying this year again, CAT, everybody is saying was very tough. DILR in particular was very tough. There were passages that one could not have probably solved even in the entire 40 minutes. Just one of the passages might have taken full 40 minutes to solve. So the key was to not worry about the 1 or 2 passages that one could not have solved in those 40 minutes. Look at probably other 2 or 3 smaller sets where people could have answered them and still got about 8-10 correct out of whatever 24. That would still see them through. Does it become kind of a very, 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 very mental game where you have to, besides being prepared, really bring out your best in terms of remaining composed, remaining positive, no matter how difficult the paper appears to be? There will be questions that you'll be able to answer. At least 50 to 60% questions will be there that you can answer. So the ability to focus on those and leave out the questions that you cannot, and remain positive throughout the session, thinking that you have prepared well enough. How important do you think is the mental aspect?
I think very rightly said. Just as with the CAT, the example you took with the river. An additional thing is that the river, no matter how cold it is and no matter how difficult the exam is, it's that way for everyone. Which essentially, and you're working with a percentile system. I know there are cutoffs, but the cutoffs will also sort of be determined by everyone's marks, right? So essentially, what's very important and what you need to do is keep your peace of mind the plan that you'd made for yourself, don't deviate from it just because the situation made you deviate from it. Deviate if you're seeing that a section's getting done earlier, that's great, then deviate from it. But otherwise, don't make the exam and the environment around you change anything that's happening there. Also, because at the end you're going to have to do the GK section, you're going to still have to apply yourself even after the conventional part of the exam that you've done. So until you get there, you need to maintain your peace of mind, and that's very important.
Absolutely.
And the exam, like Siddhant said, will try to throw you off. There will be at least one question, there might be multiple. In our case, back when we took the exam, there was also an essay question. And the essay question in the title itself had the word jingoism in it. And I know, it's not a word that a lot of people were familiar with, to the extent that the exam hall, everyone was asking the invigilators, and every invigilator was clueless. So it's
for people who it's a highly emotive word, in fact. So it's like you can, write anything about it.
Yeah. So I think things like this will happen. The only thing you need to keep in mind is that it's happening for everyone.
Everybody, yeah.
And as long as, even in our time, I think the cutoff wasn't not the cutoff. I think 99 percentile was hit at, I think, just over 55 to 60%, if I'm not wrong. And that's all you need to aim for. You don't again, not to say that you enter the exam saying I need to get 50%, because what if the exam's too easy and everyone gets 70?
Yeah.
But once you're doing the exam, if it seems tough, it probably is.
Yeah, do your best. Don't worry about 25, 30, 40% questions that you cannot answer. That is the case for everybody. If the exam.
Yes.
Very correct. Siddhant?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Like, every year when the exam is difficult, people start losing their mind over it. But then the factor boils down to that, it was difficult for everyone and your overall cutoffs will go down. So, even while you're in the exam hall, you should tell yourself that, what, if I'm struggling with this, so is everyone else. And because it's a competitive exam where there isn't like an absolute marking system, all you have to do is just be better than the next guy. And there will be plenty of people who will be, losing their minds and, panicking and stressing out over it, and end up, getting throwing questions away that could have been answered very easily if they had kept their cool. So I think that mental training or that mental calmness aspect is very important. This is what I used to do. At least it helped me a lot. Anytime I felt myself panicking, if there was a question I couldn't get, or I felt like I was running out of time, just close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths. In almost every case, it helps you, collect your thoughts and approach the same question again, or maybe move on to the next question, depending on what you want to do. But it's very important to do. And then, you'll always get those signs that you're panicking. You'll start, you'll start sweating, your heart will increase. You'll start, having shorter breaths. All of these things, this is your body telling that I'm stressing out and, I'm not working optimally right now. And it's your job to consciously bring yourself back to your baseline where you'll be performing your best. And as long as you can do that, I think, a lot of times, maybe that is the key. Because the thing is, at the top where there is competition, at the 95th percentile and above, everyone has more or less a similar amount of study
preparation.
More or less a similar amount of hours of study put in, and all of those things.
Very correct.
But over there, the differentiator becomes one, how you performed on the day of the exam. And a major criteria of that is that you kept your cool and you approached the exam in the best way possible, which you can only do if you're functioning optimally. So I think that is one technique that helps me a lot. Anytime I'm panicking or anytime I'm feeling like things are getting out of hand, just take 3 deep breaths. It always helps. It will always bring you back to baseline, and then you can attack the question with a fresh set of eyes.
And I think one thing I forgot to cover was that unlike the CAT, where in order to get into the best colleges, you would need to have like a 98 or a 99 at least. In the ZAT, the cutoffs are going to be much lower, right? So they want, because as I said, the focus isn't just on the exam. It's on the GK section. Now that there isn't an essay section, their focus might be even more on the interviews and all. So that they want to screen larger number of candidates. They want to interview a lot of candidates because they want to see that personality fit as well from the ethics perspective. right? So all of that is also still in the picture. So even if you feel, even after the exam, if you come out of the exam feeling like you underperformed, it might not matter as much, because I felt like I had underperformed. I didn't get on the first list of calls, but that didn't really mean that I wouldn't get through. So
Right.
despite having a good percentile also, that can happen. And for people
Correct.
with a lesser percentile, if they have a better profile that fits for the panel, then they might invite you still.
Okay.
Yeah, because I remember the first time. So I'd taken the exam twice. I took it once in 16, then I took it once in 17. In 16, when I took the exam, I had a 99.87, and I was rejected that year. The next year, when I took that exam, I had 98.5 or something. I was accepted that year. Plus, there were people in our batch who came in with like a 95 or a 96 percentile. So it's not like, there is definitely your marks, obviously, they matter, but they matter less than they would in the case of an FMS or an IIM A or B or something like that, because there's significant focus on the interview. And even if you have slightly lower marks in your exams, if your interview is well, if you're able to present yourself well, and you can form a connection with the interview panel, I think it would not matter in the long run, because in the end of the day, no matter if you got into the college as with a 99 or a 95, you still walk out an exceller. So
Correct.
once
So I
you
think,
have your acceptance letter, those marks stop mattering, because I don't.
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, so just that, those marks stop mattering the second you have entered the college. After that, I don't think anyone has even asked my percentile. I have not put it on my CV. No one cares about it. So it's just till the point you have entered the college.
Yeah. Just touching upon the point that both of you made, and I just took it upon thinking it's very, very important, the mental aspect. And both of you said that it's very important to bring out your best during the exam, not worry about things that you really can't do much about. So it's like not letting the things that you can't do coming in the way of things that you can. Just focus on the questions that you can answer. And if you are well prepared, you will be, in all probability, make it. Do not worry about the questions that you cannot attempt or cannot answer.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Harjeev, and thank you, Siddhant. Both of you being from
Thank you.
XLRI, I thought you were the better people to answer this, because I come from a different institute, not XLRI. So we will be back with you post that once again to do an analysis of the exam and what kind of cutoffs or what percentile kind of predictor we can expect and all. So we will have you
Sure.
back with us with an analysis. I hope what you have said here is useful for those who are going to take this act, and we wish both of you all the best in your careers, and we wish all the students also who are going to take all these exams or who aspire to get into one of the top MBA colleges all the best in their endeavor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All the best to all the students.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.